Figured I'd do a quick video on what happens with your rabbit if you have one of these, and what you can do to fix it. Okay, let's talk about this fuse block. This is a 80 rabbit. They are all the same from 1980 all the way back to 75 with this fuse block. And what happens is inside this fuse block, the solder connectors between these pins and the block itself, and then continuity between those and the other pins where it goes through the fuses and back out into the relays and all that crap, they go bad. And also the connectors, these are really terrible style connectors, so it was really awfully made. Most rabbits are in the graveyard because of this thing right here. So if you're looking at one of these things to buy, and the wiring hasn't been upgraded, just remember you're going to be probably doing this. So when I bought this thing, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to buy it because I knew about this already back in the time when I built it, and most of the wiring worked in it when I got it, and little by little the taillights stopped working and the brake lights, and no, it wasn't the grounding clusters. That's a major issue on these two. So usually you start there with the grounding clusters and double ground them, which I had those double grounded, but that wasn't the issue. I was having a problem with continuity going through this box. And one of the things that happened with these is that the wiring, what would happen is the windshield would leak water, and water would go down the firewall and then end up on this box right here. And that's the first part of it, and then you'd have rust or something on your pins because they're made out of steel. And so the other ones are made out of brass. I mean, some are brass, and I used a super cleaner and cleaned everything really, really clean before we tried to do this. So basically, if you have this problem, probably the best thing to do is do like what we're doing right here, is open up the whole dash. There you go. Big job, guys. Actually, this wasn't that hard to take off. There's only a few bolts. I think there's two bolts here, two over there. The whole dash panel just comes right out. And with the radio too, we have to take the radio out, and then it comes out in your hands, and you go ahead, and then you got all this room, so it's much easier to work on with that all out. So what we did is, of course, you need a power probe to do this. If you try to do this with just a test light or something like that, it's going to be really hard for you to figure out stuff. So what we did is we left the air conditioning circuit and the glow plug circuit alone, and also we isolated the one that's hard is we kind of isolated the flasher and turn signals before we took it apart, and then pulled all the wiring harness out of the whole front. So we're leaving the stuff like the headlight connectors, we're going to leave alone. They're in good shape, clean them. We're going to go ahead and on these wires that come out of the fender for the fender lights, the clear and the lights, we're going to leave those alone. Just wire into those, and we're going to running a whole new harness all the way to the front, because a lot of the wire also under the hood, VW put really, really small wires in, and a lot of it breaks. So this is this type of thing you're going to end up with if you have a rabbit. So that's a lot of the wire that's coming out of this thing and not going back in. These are the plugs. You pull out all your plugs, and you like your ignition switch and all that stuff, and leave some long pigtails on those. and we're going to wire those into, what we did is we got a buggy harness, which is, this is part of that, the long part of wires here from the buggy harness. And then, so now it's going to have a new fuse block. See, Chris made this thing yesterday. See if I can find it. Kind of painting it somewhere. Huh. He made this nice, beautiful bracket right here. Really cool looking. And the new fuse block is going to go on here across the front of that, so that it hangs in the exact same place as the original one, but we won't have any issues with wiring after this. But let me tell you, this is a big job. So if you're not up for this, don't buy a Rabbit, because the wiring on them is shit. And that's the way they were back in the 80s. So when this gets all done, this thing will be pretty much upgraded with the wiring, and then I'm going to go through and do some more things. I'll make another video on that, but this is basically the wiring video to let you know what you're kind of up against. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually leave the back harness in. So there's one plug on the back of your thing. If you check in the Bentley, you can find that there's one plug that goes to the back of the car, which does your fuel tank sender, your tail lights, brake lights, and your turn signals, and your backup lights are all in that part. Which the backlight lights stopped working too, but it wasn't the switch or anything like that. It was all continuity problem inside that box. So anyway, you can't buy that thing. They used to sell them years ago. I used to change those things out many years ago. People would come in, replace that sucker, and it did that and the grounding clusters, and you had a brand new car again for another week. And it would do the same thing. So they were, it was an endless problem. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to build this truck. But I went ahead and did it anyway, and now I'm paying the price. So anyway, we'll talk about some other things in another video, but that's the wiring for VW Rabbit.